first airplane, which flew some 40 years ago, left succeeding generations with a challenge to improve and perfect, develop and invent, to build and rebuild. From that first structure of wood and cloth has sprung a large and important industry. The basic principles known by the Wright brothers have since been developed into a complex science, embracing many fields of knowledge. Constant research has brought answers to endless problems, and each answer has marked a step forward in the progress of aircraft development. To a modern world, these advances meant a broader realization of aviation's values. During the war years, men who design and build aircraft were devoting their entire energies to the nation's fighties, for aviation played a major role in our total mobilization. From their drawing boards came aerial weapons which greatly changed the character of modern warfare. Under the pressure of war, which has always given impetus to rapid technical progress, phenomenal advances were made in the design, engineering, and performance of military aircraft. With each design for specific tactical requirements, taken together, these aerial weapons brought to our air forces the fast, hard-hitting, long-range fighters which helped to achieve for this nation and our allies air supremacy and final victory. Well known to aviation research engineers for some time has been the fact that further development along the lines of the original basic pattern would eventually reach an impasse, beyond which efforts to improve speed and altitude performance would lead to prohibitive inefficiencies. Forward-looking men have for years been seeking new power systems to overcome these impending limitations. Systems capable of delivering greater horsepower, which can be more fully absorbed, smaller, lighter in weight, simpler, with less wear and longer life. The feeling has been that the answer might be found in an entirely different principle for the powering of aircraft, perhaps an engine without the usual reciprocating parts. Recently, interest has centered on a system of propulsion which gets its driving force from a powerful jet of gases. It is called thermal jet propulsion. Power by means of a jet isn't a new idea. Hero used it in his Aeolipile over 2,000 years ago. Steam from the lower vessel rising through a hollow support entered the freewheeling hollow sphere. Escaping through two jets diametrically opposed, the steam caused the sphere to revolve. In the 17th century, Sir Isaac Newton, the English astronomer, proposed to drive a cart using this principle. Steam generated in the boiler would issue through the rear jet, propelling the cart forward. A steam cock regulated the speed. It didn't actually work, but its principle has been standing by these many years. 3 centuries later, in the small English town of Lutterworth, a countryman of Newton succeeded in developing a modern application of this principle. British engineers had long sought to develop jet propulsion for the powering of aircraft. In 1937, after 4 years of research and experimentation, Group Captain Frank Whittle, a Royal Air Force pilot since 1928, demonstrated the first successful jet engine. The program was accelerated in a secret workshop of Power Jets Limited, and in May of 1941, successful flight tests were made with an improved design. Important military potentialities were indicated and full information was disclosed to the United States Army Air Forces. The prototype engine was shipped to the United States, where the Air Forces assigned quantity production of the engines to the General Electric Company, long experienced in turbine manufacture. The design and manufacture of an airplane to be powered by these engines was assigned to the Bell Aircraft Corporation, innovators in fighter aircraft. In a call from the office of General H.H. Arnold, Commanding General of the Army Air Forces, officials of the two companies were invited to a conference in Washington, where the new project was launched, 3 months before America's entry into the war was to redouble its urgency. Utmost secrecy was as vital as speed in the execution of this project, and at Bell it was revealed at first only to the engineers whose job it was to design the airplane. There was little precedent from which they could benefit, for this was a whole new concept for aircraft power, nor was there time for wind tunnel programs or other lengthy research. The design had to be completed as quickly as possible and still measure up to current military aircraft. not on a one-airplane basis, but for quantity production. During 2 weeks of intensive work, a number of designs for a twin-engine, single-place fighter were considered. Toward the end of that period, the best features contained in the many sketches were carefully analyzed, and a decision was reached as to the design to be submitted. For a final study in the short time allowed, a small model was made. This design, developed through the joint efforts of Army and Bell engineers, was approved and designated the P-59 A. The design underwent rapid development, and as the details were refined, the work of construction was begun. Loft templates were laid out as patterns for the parts. Holding fixtures were designed and erected for the construction of sub-assemblies. Forms were cast for the shaping of parts. For secrecy, the entire operation was set up as an independent manufacturing unit and staffed with a select group of craftsmen. Completed parts found their places in various sub-assemblies planned in accordance with quantity production requirements. The airplane began to take shape as these assemblies were brought together. Work that ordinarily would take months, perhaps years, was compressed into a fraction of that time by a day and night schedule. At General Electric, a huge new chimney had sprung up almost overnight. It was part of a vault-like test chamber rushed to completion for testing the British prototype and subsequent engines. To the men assigned to this work, the test cell seemed strong enough to protect the nation's gold reserve. Here, the engine was studied for adaptation to American production methods. The work of building the first engines was not centered in a secret plant as at Bell. The problem of security was solved in a different way. The parts for the jet engine were very similar to those of the airplane superchargers in production at the plant. The work was distributed to shops throughout the various factories, and the nature of the project further obscured by the designation Type I supercharger. In this way, the existence of the engines was known only to those few selected to assemble them. Within 6 months, the first American-built engine had been tested at General Electric, and as at Bell, the mechanism for continued production had been set up. Meanwhile, across the continent, the Army Air Forces had prepared a secret desert base for an intensive flight test program. The airplane arrived complete with engines which had been constantly rotated to protect the bearing surfaces from vibration in transit. It had been accompanied on its cross-country trip by a corps of mechanics and by a guard of military police to ensure its secrecy. The assembly of the airplane culminated months of searching and concentrated effort. For in its development, designers and engineers had been confronted by many problems and questions for which there had been no precedent. Only now, by operational tests of the airplane itself, could these questions be answered. One question was the intense heat from the jets. How would it affect the structure? A test was devised using chemically treated paints that would char at different temperatures, and the engines were started up in the ship for the first time. Each engine was given 3 5-minute runs. Result, heat effects were negligible. What about the jet blast? Was it dangerous for ground personnel? At moderate distances, it was found that heat was not excessive. No more precaution was needed than for the propeller slipstream of a conventional airplane, which might impair control of the airplane. This problem had been anticipated in the upswept tail design, but the exact characteristics of the jet stream could not be determined until performance data was available. A series of accelerated taxi tests, extending well into the evening of the first day of testing, provided the answer. Control was satisfactory. The next day, preparations were begun for the first actual flight.